in the golden halls of Valdoria's ancient palace, where centuries of royal portraits gaze down with knowing eyes, a single envelope would destroy everything the kingdom believed about their beloved royal family. Princess Elena had always been the dutiful daughter, the one who followed protocol, and never questioned the crown's decisions. But when she discovered documents hidden in her late mother's private chambers, revealing a betrayal so shocking it threatened to tear the royal family apart, she faced an impossible choice: protect the monarchy she was born to serve, or expose the truth that could save her kingdom from a decades-old lie. As thunder rolled across the palace grounds that fateful October evening, Elena clutched the evidence that would force her to choose between family loyalty and justice, knowing that either decision would change the course of Valdoria's history forever. The morning mist clung to the towers of Rosemore Palace like secrets refusing to be told. Princess Elena Blackwood stood at her bedroom window watching the gardeners tend to the royal roses below, unaware that this would be the last ordinary morning of her life. At 28, she had grown accustomed to the weight of royal expectations, the careful balance between public duty and private longing that defined every moment of her existence. Elena had always been different from her younger brother, Prince Marcus, who embraced the spotlight with natural charm and easy confidence. While Marcus thrived at royal galas and diplomatic functions, Elena preferred the quiet corners of the palace library, where she could lose herself in history books and correspondence from distant kingdoms. Her father, King Theodore Blackwood, often remarked that Elena had inherited her mother's thoughtful nature, though he said it with a sadness that Elena never quite understood. Queen Isabella had died when Elena was only 15, a sudden illness that swept through the palace like wildfire, claiming the beloved queen within days. The official story spoke of a rare tropical disease contracted during a diplomatic mission to the southern colonies, but Elena had always sensed there were details missing from the narrative. The way conversation stopped when she entered rooms, the carefully neutral expressions of the court physicians, the locked chambers in the East Wing that remained untouched even 13 years later. This particular morning brought with it an unusual summons. Lord Chancellor Whitmore, a stern man with silver hair and penetrating gray eyes, requested Elena's presence in the royal archives. She found him standing among towering shelves of ancient documents, his expression more troubled than she had ever seen it.
"Your Highness," he began, his usual formal tone carrying an undercurrent of anxiety, "we have discovered something that requires your immediate attention. Yesterday, while cataloging the late Queen's personal effects for the upcoming memorial exhibition, we found a hidden compartment in her writing desk."
Elena's heart quickened. Her mother's writing desk had been moved to the archives years ago, deemed too painful for the king to keep in his daily quarters. What kind of compartment? Lord Whitmore led her to a corner table where an ornate wooden box sat open, revealing a collection of letters, photographs, and documents. The contents are concerning. We believe you should review them before we proceed with any official action. As Elena approached the box, she caught sight of her mother's elegant handwriting on several envelopes. But what drew her attention were the official-looking documents beneath the letters, bearing the royal seal but marked with classifications she had never seen before. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted the first document. It was a medical report dated just 3 months before her mother's death, but the contents made no sense. Instead of tropical disease, the document described something else entirely: evidence of poisoning, specifically a rare toxin derived from nightshade. The physician's notes detailed symptoms that matched her mother's final illness, but the conclusion was shocking. The poisoning appeared to be deliberate, administered over several weeks through gradually increasing doses. "This cannot be authentic," Elena whispered, but even as she spoke, she recognized the signatures of the royal physicians who had treated her mother. Lord Whitmore's expression grew graver. "There is more, Your Highness. The letters reveal that your mother suspected someone within the palace of orchestrating the poisoning. She was conducting her own investigation in the weeks before her death." Elena's hands shook as she lifted one of her mother's letters. The elegant script she remembered so well revealed words that chilled her to the bone. "My dearest sister, I fear my suspicions are correct. The person I trusted most has betrayed not only me, but our entire kingdom. The evidence I have gathered points to a conspiracy that reaches the highest levels of our government. If something happens to me,
Please ensure these documents reach Elena when she is old enough to understand their significance. The letter was addressed to her Aunt Margaret, Queen Isabella's younger sister, who had moved to the neighboring kingdom of Astoria shortly after the funeral. Elena had always wondered why her aunt left so suddenly, abandoning her position as a lady of the court without explanation. As Elena continued reading, the scope of the conspiracy became clear. Her mother had discovered that someone had been selling military secrets to Valdoria's enemies, using their position in the royal court to access classified information about troop movements, defensive strategies, and diplomatic negotiations. The betrayal had potentially compromised several military campaigns and resulted in unnecessary casualties among Valdoria's soldiers. But the most shocking revelation came in the final letter, dated just 2 days before Queen Isabella's death. In her mother's careful handwriting, Elena read words that made her blood run cold. "I now know who has been betraying our kingdom, and the knowledge may cost me my life.
It is someone so close to Theodore that he will never suspect them. Someone who has gained access to our most guarded secrets through manipulation and false loyalty. I pray I am wrong, but all evidence points to Lady Catherine Ashford." Elena's legs gave way and she sank into the nearest chair. Lady Catherine Ashford was now Queen Catherine, her father's second wife, whom he had married just 2 years after Queen Isabella's death. The woman who had comforted the grieving king, who had helped raise Elena and Marcus through their teenage years, who had been like a second mother to them both. "Your Highness," Lord Whitmore said gently, "there is one more item you need to see." He handed her a small leather journal, its pages filled with her mother's meticulous notes and observations. The entries detailed months of careful investigation, recording suspicious conversations, unusual meetings, and financial discrepancies that painted a picture of systematic betrayal. Queen Isabella had been building a case against Lady Catherine, documenting evidence that would have been sufficient to bring charges of treason. The final entry, made the night before her death, was brief but devastating. "Catherine knows I suspect her. She came to my chambers tonight with tea, insisting I needed rest for tomorrow's state dinner. Her manner was strange, almost nervous. I have hidden all evidence where it will be safe. If I am right about Catherine, she will try to eliminate me before I can expose her. God help Theodore if I am correct, for he loves her deeply and will be destroyed by the truth." Elena closed the journal with trembling hands, her mind reeling from the implications. If her mother's suspicions were correct, then Queen Catherine had not only betrayed the kingdom, but had murdered Queen Isabella to cover her crimes. Even worse, she had manipulated King Theodore's grief to position herself as his new queen, gaining even greater access to state secrets and royal privileges. "What do we do with this information?" Elena asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lord Whitmore's expression was grave. "That decision rests with you, Your Highness. This evidence could destroy Queen Catherine, but it would also devastate your father and potentially destabilize the entire kingdom. The people love Queen Catherine, and many see her marriage to the king as a fairy tale romance that helped heal the nation after your mother's death." Elena understood the terrible weight of the choice before her. Exposing the truth could bring justice for her mother and prevent further betrayals, but it would shatter her father's world and potentially throw Valdoria into chaos. However, allowing Queen Catherine to continue in her position of power meant that the betrayals would likely continue, and more lives could be lost. "I need time to think," Elena said, carefully placing the documents back in the box. "And I need to verify this information independently. If we are going to make accusations against the Queen, we must be absolutely certain of our facts." As she left the archives that morning, Elena felt the weight of her mother's secrets pressing down on her shoulders. The palace corridors that had once felt like home now seemed filled with shadows and whispered threats. Every servant's glance, every courtier's smile, every gesture from Queen Catherine herself would now be examined through the lens of suspicion and fear. The most painful realization was that her mother had died alone with this terrible knowledge, unable to trust anyone in the palace with the truth. Now Elena faced the same isolation, carrying secrets that could change the fate of the kingdom while surrounded by people who might be allies or enemies. That evening, as she watched Queen Catherine charm dinner guests with her usual grace and warmth, Elena struggled to reconcile the loving stepmother she knew with the calculating traitor her mother's evidence suggested. Every laugh, every gentle gesture toward King Theodore, every affectionate word to Elena and Marcus felt like a performance designed to maintain an elaborate deception. The hardest part was seeing her father's obvious happiness with his second wife. King Theodore had been a broken man after Queen Isabella's death, and Catherine's presence had genuinely restored his joy and confidence. If Elena's mother was right, then Catherine's love was nothing more than a carefully orchestrated manipulation designed to gain power and access to royal secrets. As the evening wore on, Elena made her decision. She would conduct her own investigation following her mother's trail of evidence while searching for additional proof. She owed it to her mother's memory to uncover the truth, regardless of the personal cost. But she would be careful, methodical, and above all, secretive. If Queen Catherine was indeed guilty of treason and murder, then Elena's own life could be in danger the moment her stepmother realized she knew the truth. The next phase of Elena's life would be dedicated to uncovering the full scope of the conspiracy that had claimed her mother's life and threatened their kingdom's security. But as she lay in her bed that night, staring at the ceiling and listening to the wind howl through the palace walls, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that she was already being watched, that her investigation had not gone as unnoticed as she had hoped. The following weeks transformed Elena from a dutiful princess into a careful investigator. She began each day with her usual royal obligations, attending state meetings, participating in ceremonial functions, and maintaining the facade of normalcy that court life demanded. But her evenings were dedicated to methodically reviewing her mother's evidence and conducting her own careful inquiries. Elena's first breakthrough came when she decided to contact her Aunt Margaret in Astoria. Using diplomatic channels, she arranged for a private correspondence, under the guise of planning a memorial service for Queen Isabella. Margaret's response arrived within days, and it confirmed Elena's worst fears. "My dearest Elena," Margaret had written, "I have waited 13 years for someone to ask the right questions. Your mother shared her suspicions with me in her final weeks, and I have carried the burden of that knowledge ever since. I left Valdoria because I could not bear to watch Catherine manipulate your father while knowing what I knew. Your mother was thorough in her investigation, and I believe her conclusions were correct." Margaret's letter included additional information that Queen Isabella had shared with her. Lady Catherine had accumulated significant debts before her marriage to the king, debts that mysteriously disappeared after she gained access to the royal household. Financial records showed large sums of money flowing into accounts connected to Catherine's family estate, payments that corresponded suspiciously with major military setbacks for Valdoria's army. More disturbing still, Margaret revealed that she had witnessed a clandestine meeting between Catherine and Lord Reginald Thornbury, a minor noble who was later discovered to be a spy for the neighboring kingdom of Drakmoor. The meeting had taken place in the palace gardens just weeks before a crucial battle in which Valdoria's forces were ambushed, suggesting that military secrets had been passed along. "Your mother documented everything," Margaret continued. She had photographs of secret meetings, copies of financial transfers, and even recordings of conversations that implicated Catherine in the spy network. But she died before she could present her evidence to the proper authorities. Elena realized that her investigation needed to expand beyond her mother's hidden documents. She began discreetly questioning long-serving palace staff, focusing on individuals who had worked closely with both queens and might have observed unusual behavior or suspicious activities. Her most valuable source proved to be Mrs. Hartwell, the head housekeeper who had served the royal family for over 30 years. The elderly woman had always been fond of Elena, and after some careful probing, she revealed observations that supported Queen Isabella's suspicions. "Lady Catherine used to have many visitors before she married your father, Mrs. Hartwell confided during one of their private conversations. Strange men who came at odd hours, always meeting in the East Garden Pavilion. After she became queen, the meetings moved to the old library tower, the one that's supposedly been closed for renovations all these years. This information led Elena to explore parts of the palace she had never visited. The old library tower, supposedly under renovation since Queen Catherine's marriage, was actually being used as a secret meeting place. Elena discovered evidence of recent use, fresh candles, modern furniture, and most tellingly, a hidden safe behind one of the false book panels. Breaking into the safe required skills Elena had never thought she would need as a princess, but her determination overcame her inexperience.
Inside, she found documents that proved her mother's case beyond any doubt. There were detailed records of information sales, correspondence with enemy agents, and most damning of all, a ledger showing payments received for specific military intelligence. But the discovery that shocked Elena most was a series of letters written in Catherine's hand, planning Queen Isabella's murder. The letters revealed that Catherine had been slowly poisoning the Queen for months, using a rare toxin that would mimic tropical disease. The method was chosen specifically because it would explain away symptoms that might otherwise raise suspicions of foul play. One letter, addressed to an unnamed accomplice, contained chilling details. Isabella grows weaker each day, but she has not yet succumbed. I must increase the dosage, despite the risk of detection. She came too close to discovering our network yesterday, and we cannot allow her investigation to continue. Theodore must believe this is a natural illness, or our entire operation will be compromised. Elena photographed every document with a small camera she had acquired through careful negotiations with a trusted friend outside the palace. The evidence was overwhelming, but it also revealed the scope of the conspiracy was larger than her mother had realized. Catherine was not working alone, but was part of an extensive spy network that had infiltrated multiple levels of Valdoria's government. As Elena delved deeper into the conspiracy, she began to notice changes in Queen Catherine's behavior toward her. The warm motherly affection that had characterized their relationship for years was gradually replaced by a more watchful, calculating manner. Catherine began asking subtle questions about Elena's activities, her research interests, and her correspondence with family members abroad. The turning point came during a state dinner honoring foreign diplomats. Elena was seated near Queen Catherine when she overheard a conversation that chilled her blood. Catherine was speaking quietly with Lord Whitmore, but Elena caught enough words to understand they were discussing the discovery of Queen Isabella's hidden documents. "A matter has been contained," Catherine was saying, "but we must ensure that no further investigations are conducted. The royal family's reputation cannot withstand such scrutiny." Lord Whitmore's response was even more disturbing. "Princess Elena has been asking many questions lately. Perhaps it would be wise to arrange for her to take an extended diplomatic mission abroad, somewhere she can be properly supervised." Elena realized with growing horror that Lord Whitmore, the man she had trusted with her mother's secrets, was also part of the conspiracy. Her careful investigation had not gone unnoticed, and now she was in immediate danger. That night, Elena made copies of all the evidence she had gathered and arranged for them to be hidden in multiple secure locations throughout the kingdom. She also wrote detailed letters to trusted allies, including her Aunt Margaret and several foreign diplomats who had been friends of her mother. If something happened to her, the truth would still come to light. But Elena's most crucial decision was to approach her brother Marcus directly. Despite his youth and his close relationship with Queen Catherine, Marcus deserved to know the truth about their mother's death and the ongoing threat to their kingdom. The conversation would be difficult and dangerous, but Elena could no longer carry the burden of knowledge alone. She found Marcus in the royal stables, where he often went to think and escape the pressures of court life. At 25, he had matured into a thoughtful young man, though he still possessed the impulsive nature that had gotten him into trouble during his teenage years. "Marcus," Elena began carefully, "I need to share something with you that will change everything you believe about our family and our kingdom." Over the next hour, Elena laid out the entire conspiracy, showing Marcus copies of their mother's evidence and the additional proof she had discovered. She watched his expression change from skepticism to shock to rage as he absorbed the implications of what Catherine had done. "You're telling me that Catherine murdered our mother and has been selling our military secrets for over a decade?" Marcus's voice was tight with controlled fury. "The evidence is overwhelming," Elena replied. "But Marcus, we have to be extremely careful how we proceed. Catherine knows I've been investigating, and Lord Whitmore is working with her. We can't trust anyone within the normal court hierarchy." Marcus stood silently for several minutes, processing the information. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a determination Elena had never heard before. "What do you need me to do?" Together, they began planning their next move. Elena's investigation had provided them with proof of Catherine's crimes, but they needed a way to expose the truth without putting themselves in immediate danger. They also had to consider their father's emotional well-being and the potential impact on the kingdom's stability. Their plan would require careful coordination,
trusted allies, and perfect timing. But for the first time since discovering her mother's hidden documents, Elena felt hope that justice might finally be served. The conspiracy that had claimed Queen Isabella's life and threatened Valdoria's security for over a decade was about to be exposed, regardless of the personal cost to the royal family. As they concluded their secret meeting, Elena and Marcus both understood that they had crossed a line from which there could be no return. They were now actively working to expose and destroy Queen Catherine, the woman who had raised them and whom their father loved deeply. The next phase of their investigation would determine not only whether justice would be served, but whether their family and their kingdom could survive the revelations that were about to unfold. The plan Elena and Marcus devised was intricate and dangerous, requiring them to maintain their normal routines while secretly preparing to expose Queen Catherine's crimes. They decided to work with trusted allies outside the palace while gathering additional evidence that would make their case irrefutable in the eyes of both their father and the kingdom's people. Elena's first crucial step was to establish secure communication with her Aunt Margaret, who could provide testimony about Queen Isabella's final weeks and serve as a witness to Catherine's suspicious behavior. Using a network of trusted merchants and diplomatic couriers, Elena arranged for Margaret to secretly return to Valdoria under an assumed identity, staying at a safe house in the capital city while they prepared their evidence. Meanwhile, Marcus focused on investigating the military consequences of Catherine's betrayals. Using his connections with young officers and his access to military records, he began documenting the battles and campaigns that had failed due to leaked intelligence. The pattern was clear and devastating. Every major military setback over the past decade could be traced to information that Catherine would have had access to through her position as queen. Their investigation revealed that hundreds of Valdorian soldiers had died unnecessarily because enemy forces knew their positions, strategies, and weaknesses in advance. Entire military campaigns had been compromised, resulting in territorial losses and weakened defenses that continued to threaten the kingdom's security. The siblings also discovered that Catherine's spy network extended far beyond military intelligence. She had been providing information about trade negotiations, diplomatic strategies, and even personal details about foreign diplomats that could be used for blackmail or manipulation. The scope of the betrayal was staggering, affecting virtually every aspect of Valdoria's government and international relations. As they gathered evidence, Elena and Marcus became increasingly aware that they were being watched. Palace guards began appearing in unusual locations, servants started asking probing questions about their activities, and Queen Catherine herself became more attentive to their whereabouts and schedules. The situation became critical when Elena discovered that her private chambers had been searched. Books were slightly out of place, personal letters had been disturbed, and most tellingly, a hidden compartment where she had stored copies of some documents had been opened and resealed. Catherine's agents were clearly getting desperate to find out how much Elena knew and what evidence she possessed. "We're running out of time," Elena told Marcus during one of their secret meetings. "Catherine knows we're investigating her, and she's going to act soon to protect herself." Their fears were confirmed when Lord Whitmore approached Elena with a formal proposal that she undertake an immediate diplomatic mission to a remote kingdom in the far north. The mission would last at least 6 months and would effectively remove Elena from Valdoria during the crucial period when they planned to expose Catherine's crimes. "The timing is quite urgent," Whitmore explained with barely concealed satisfaction. "The northern kingdoms have requested a royal representative to negotiate new trade agreements, and your expertise in international relations makes you the ideal candidate." Elena recognized the proposal for what it was, an elegant way to remove her from the kingdom before she could cause further problems for the conspiracy. Her refusal would raise suspicions, but accepting would mean abandoning her investigation at the crucial moment when they were close to having enough evidence to confront their father. "I'm honored by the opportunity," Elena replied carefully, "but I believe Prince Marcus would be better suited for this particular mission. His natural diplomacy and fresh perspective would serve Valdoria well in establishing new relationships with the northern kingdoms." The suggestion clearly frustrated Whitmore, but he could not openly object without revealing his true motivations. Marcus, understanding his sister's strategy, enthusiastically accepted the proposed mission, then promptly requested a 2-month delay to complete his current responsibilities and prepare adequately for such an important diplomatic role. The delay bought them precious time, but it also escalated the danger they faced. Catherine began taking more direct action to discover what they knew and to neutralize the threat they represented. She started having private conversations with King Theodore about Elena's recent behavior, suggesting that the stress of royal duties might be affecting her judgment and mental stability. "Theodore, darling," Catherine said during one such conversation that Elena accidentally overheard. "I'm worried about Elena. She's been acting strangely lately, spending hours in the archives, asking odd questions about the past, corresponding with people abroad. Perhaps she needs some time away from the pressures of court life." Elena realized that Catherine was laying the groundwork to have her declared mentally unstable if necessary, a move that would discredit any evidence she might present and justify having her confined or removed from succession. The strategy was brilliant and terrifying in its simplicity. The siblings' most dangerous moment came when they decided to confront one of Catherine's known accomplices directly. Through their investigation, they had identified Sir Geoffrey Hartwick, the palace's chief of security, as a key member of the spy network. Elena and Marcus arranged to meet with him privately, hoping to either turn him against Catherine or gather evidence of his involvement. The meeting, held in Marcus's private study, quickly turned confrontational. When presented with evidence of his participation in the conspiracy, Sir Geoffrey became threatening and aggressive. "You have no idea what you're meddling with," he warned. "This network has been in place for years, and it has protection at the highest levels of government. Queen Catherine is not someone you want as an enemy. She's already our enemy," Marcus replied firmly. "She murdered our mother and has been betraying our kingdom for over a decade. The only question is whether you're going to continue helping her or help us bring her to justice." Sir Geoffrey's response chilled them both. "Your mother died because she couldn't leave well enough alone, just like the two of you. Catherine has been patient, but her patience has limits. If you continue this investigation, you may find yourselves suffering from the same sudden illness that claimed Queen Isabella." The threat was unmistakable, confirming their worst fears about what Catherine was capable of doing to protect her secrets. But it also provided them with additional evidence, as Marcus had secretly recorded the entire conversation, using a small device hidden in his study. Following the confrontation with Sir Geoffrey, Elena and Marcus knew they had to accelerate their timeline. They arranged an emergency meeting with their Aunt Margaret, who had been gathering additional evidence and witness testimony during her secret stay in the capital. Margaret brought disturbing news about the broader implications of Catherine's spy network. "The conspiracy extends beyond Valdoria," she explained. "Catherine has been working with agents from multiple kingdoms to destabilize the entire region. The intelligence she's provided has been used to manipulate trade agreements, influence territorial disputes, and even affect succession decisions in neighboring kingdoms." The revelation meant that exposing Catherine would have international implications, potentially affecting diplomatic relationships and regional stability. But it also meant that Elena and Marcus had allies in other kingdoms who had been damaged by Catherine's betrayals and would support efforts to bring her to justice. Margaret also brought a message from Queen Isabella's former physician, who had fled Valdoria shortly after Isabella's death. The physician, now living in exile, was willing to testify about the evidence of poisoning he had documented, but had been forced to suppress under pressure from palace officials. "Blackwood has kept detailed records of your mother's treatment and the suspicious circumstances of her death," Margaret explained. "He's prepared to return to Valdoria to provide testimony, but only if he can be guaranteed protection from Catherine's agents." With the physician's testimony, Aunt Margaret's witness accounts, the documentary evidence Elena had discovered, and Marcus's research into the military consequences of the betrayals, they finally had enough proof to confront King Theodore with the truth about his beloved second wife. But as they prepared for the most difficult conversation of their lives, Elena and Marcus realized that exposing Catherine would destroy their father's world and potentially throw the kingdom into chaos. They would need to present their evidence carefully, providing Theodore with undeniable proof, while also offering a path forward that could preserve the monarchy's stability and the kingdom's security. The stage was set for a confrontation that would determine the fate of the royal family and the kingdom of Valdoria. Catherine, sensing that her enemies were closing in, was preparing her own final moves to eliminate the threat and preserve her position of power. The next phase of the conflict would determine whether justice would finally be served for Queen Isabella's murder, or whether Catherine's conspiracy would claim additional victims from the royal family she had already betrayed so thoroughly. The confrontation Elena and Marcus had been planning for weeks came sooner than expected, forced by circumstances beyond their control.
Queen Catherine, growing increasingly desperate to protect her secrets, made a critical error that exposed her guilt beyond any doubt. It began with King Theodore falling mysteriously ill during a routine state dinner. The symptoms were eerily similar to those that had claimed Queen Isabella the 13 years earlier. Sudden weakness, confusion, digestive problems, and a rapid deterioration in overall health. The palace physicians were baffled, suggesting the same tropical disease diagnosis that had been used to explain Queen Isabella's death. But Elena and Marcus, now alert to the patterns of Catherine's previous crimes, immediately suspected poisoning. They secretly arranged for independent medical testing through Dr. Blackwood, Queen Isabella's former physician, who had returned to Valdoria under protection from foreign allies. The results confirmed their worst fears. King Theodore was being slowly poisoned with the same rare toxin that had killed his first wife. Catherine is eliminating anyone who might threaten her position, Elena realized with growing horror. Father must have started asking uncomfortable questions about the past, or perhaps he noticed something suspicious about her behavior. The discovery that their father's life was in immediate danger forced Elena and Marcus to abandon their careful, methodical approach. They could no longer wait to gather perfect evidence or plan the ideal moment for revelation. King Theodore would die within days unless they acted immediately. Elena's first move was to secretly arrange for her father's protection. Working with Dr. Blackwood and a small group of trusted guards who had served Queen Isabella, they established a secure medical facility in a hidden wing of the palace. King Theodore was moved there under the pretense of receiving specialized treatment for his mysterious illness, effectively removing him from Catherine's reach while beginning the process of neutralizing the poison in his system. Catherine's reaction to Theodore's sudden relocation revealed the extent of her desperation. She demanded immediate access to her husband, claiming her right as queen to oversee his medical care. When denied entry by the guards Elena had positioned, Catherine became increasingly agitated and threatening. "You have no authority to keep me from my husband," she declared angrily to Elena. "I am the Queen of Valdoria, and I will not be denied access by anyone, including you." Elena's response was carefully measured but firm. "Father is receiving the medical attention he requires. When he is well enough for visitors, you will be informed." That evening, Catherine made her most revealing mistake. Believing that King Theodore might die despite her plans, she attempted to accelerate the timeline for eliminating Elena and Marcus. She arranged for what appeared to be an accidental gas leak in the wing of the palace where the siblings had their private quarters, timing it for the middle of the night when they would be asleep and unlikely to escape. The plot was discovered only because Marcus had been unable to sleep and was walking the palace corridors when he noticed the distinctive smell of gas and saw suspicious figures near the ventilation systems. His quick action in alerting guards and evacuating the area prevented what would have been a catastrophic explosion that could have killed dozens of people. The assassination attempt provided Elena with the final piece of evidence she needed. The men involved in sabotaging the gas lines were quickly captured and, under pressure, revealed that they had been hired by Sir Geoffrey Hartwick on behalf of Queen Catherine. The plot to kill the royal siblings was documented with physical evidence, witness testimony, and signed confessions that could not be denied or explained away. With their father safe from further poisoning, and clear evidence of Catherine's attempts to murder them, Elena and Marcus finally felt ready to present their case. But they decided to confront Catherine directly, before involving King Theodore, hoping to secure a confession that would make the painful process of revelation easier for their father. The confrontation took place in the old library tower, the same location where Catherine had conducted her spy meetings for over a decade. Elena and Marcus arrived with armed guards and representatives from foreign kingdoms who had been damaged by Catherine's betrayals. They also brought Drs. Blackwood and Margaret and several palace servants who could provide eyewitness testimony about Catherine's suspicious activities. Catherine initially attempted to maintain her innocence, claiming that she was being framed by enemies of the crown who sought to destabilize the monarchy. But when presented with the overwhelming evidence, the spy network documents, financial records, poison analysis, and assassination plot confessions, her facade finally cracked. "You have no idea what you've done," Catherine said, her voice cold and calculating as she abandoned her usual warm demeanor. "Valdoria needed the information arrangements I facilitated. This kingdom was weak and vulnerable,
and I provided the connections that kept it from being completely destroyed by more powerful neighbors. Elena was appalled by the rationalization. You murdered my mother and betrayed our military secrets, causing the deaths of hundreds of soldiers. How can you possibly justify that as protecting Valdoria? Catherine's response revealed the depth of her delusion and self-interest. Isabella was going to destroy everything I had built. She was naive and idealistic, unable to understand the complexities of international politics. My network provided valuable intelligence that helped Valdoria navigate dangerous diplomatic waters. Your network provided intelligence to our enemies, Marcus countered angrily. You sold our military positions, betrayed our allies, and compromised our defenses. You weren't protecting Valdoria. You were selling it piece by piece for your own profit. The confrontation continued for hours, with Catherine alternating between justification, denial, and threats. She revealed additional details about the conspiracy, including the names of other accomplices and the scope of her intelligence-selling operation. But she showed no genuine remorse for her actions, viewing them as necessary steps to maintain her position and advance her own interests. The most chilling revelation came when Catherine explained her decision to murder Queen Isabella. Isabella left me no choice. She was conducting her investigation clumsily, asking direct questions that would have exposed not only me but the entire network. Her death was regrettable but necessary to prevent a much larger catastrophe. When asked about poisoning King Theodore, Catherine's response was equally cold. Theodore was starting to ask uncomfortable questions about the past. His memory of Isabella's final weeks was becoming too clear, and he was beginning to suspect that her death wasn't natural. I couldn't allow him to discover the truth and destroy everything we had accomplished. By the end of the confrontation, Elena and Marcus had secured a complete confession from Catherine, recorded and witnessed by multiple credible observers. The evidence was now overwhelming and undeniable, providing clear proof of treason, murder, attempted murder, and conspiracy that spanned over a decade. But Catherine had one final threat. If you expose me, you'll destroy your father and destabilize the entire kingdom. The people love me, and they believe in the fairy tale romance of our marriage. Revealing the truth will shatter their faith in the monarchy and could lead to rebellion or foreign invasion. Eleanor realized that Catherine's final manipulation attempt contained a kernel of truth. Exposing the queen's crimes would indeed cause significant upheaval and could threaten the kingdom's stability. But allowing her to continue in power was unthinkable, given her willingness to murder anyone who threatened her position. The solution Elena proposed was both just and pragmatic. Catherine would abdicate quietly, claiming health problems that required her to retire from public life. She would be exiled to a remote location where she could be monitored but not executed, sparing the kingdom the chaos of a public trial while ensuring she could never again threaten the royal family or national security. In exchange for this mercy, Catherine would provide complete information about her spy network, helping authorities identify and neutralize all remaining conspirators. She would also transfer all assets gained through her treasonous activities to a fund for the families of soldiers who had died due to her betrayals. Catherine, faced with the alternative of public execution for treason, reluctantly agreed to the terms. But Elena and Marcus knew they could never trust her completely, and arrangements were made for permanent exile under strict supervision in a foreign kingdom that had also been damaged by her espionage activities. The final challenge would be explaining the situation to King Theodore, who was recovering from his poisoning but remained unaware of the full scope of his wife's betrayal. The conversation would be devastating for him personally. But Elena and Marcus knew their father deserved to understand the truth about both of his wives and the threats his kingdom had faced. As they prepared for that difficult conversation, Elena reflected on how much she had changed since discovering her mother's hidden documents. She had evolved from a dutiful princess into someone capable of conducting complex investigations, making life-and-death decisions and protecting her family and kingdom from threats that came from within their own palace walls. The conversation with King Theodore took place in his private recovery chambers, with only Elena, Marcus, and Dr. Blackwood present. Theodore had regained much of his strength, as the poison was neutralized from his system, but he remained weak and confused about the circumstances that had led to his illness and isolation from Queen Catherine. "My children," he began slowly. "I've been told that Catherine cannot visit me while I recover, but no one will explain why. What has happened that requires such secrecy?" Elena and Marcus exchanged glances.
knowing that the next hour would fundamentally change their father's understanding of his life for the past 13 years.
Elena took the lead, beginning with the discovery of Queen Isabella's hidden documents and carefully walking through the evidence they had uncovered. King Theodore's initial reaction was complete disbelief.
"You're suggesting that Catherine murdered your mother and has been betraying our kingdom for over a decade?"
That's impossible. Catherine loved Isabella like a sister, and she has been nothing but devoted to our family and our kingdom. Father, Marcus said gently, we understand how difficult this is to accept. We felt the same way when we first discovered the evidence. But the proof is overwhelming and undeniable. Dr. Blackwood provided the medical evidence, explaining the poison analysis that had revealed Queen Isabella's true cause of death and the identical toxin that had recently threatened King Theodore's life. The physician's detailed records and scientific evidence were difficult to dismiss, even for a man desperate to believe in his wife's innocence.
As Elena presented document after document, photograph after photograph, and witness testimony after witness testimony, Theodore's expression gradually changed from disbelief to confusion to growing horror. The evidence painted a picture of systematic betrayal and manipulation that had characterized his entire second marriage.
"The woman I love," Theodore whispered. "The woman who comforted me after Isabella's death, who helped me raise my children, who shares my bed and my throne. You're telling me she orchestrated Isabella's murder and has been selling our secrets to enemies?" The most painful revelation for Theodore was understanding how Catherine had manipulated his grief and loneliness after Queen Isabella's death. Her comfort and support, which had seemed like genuine love and devotion, was revealed to have been calculated manipulation designed to position her as the new queen and gain access to even more sensitive information.
"She saw your vulnerability as an opportunity," Elena explained gently.
Her expressions of love and support were part of a long-term strategy to secure her position and expand her spy network. Theodore's response was heartbreaking to witness. The man who had ruled Valdoria with wisdom and strength for decades was reduced to tears as he absorbed the implications of what his children were telling him. Everything he believed about his personal happiness and his judgment of character had been revealed as an elaborate deception.
"How could I have been so blind?" he asked. "How could I have allowed someone to manipulate me so completely? What does this say about my ability to rule, to protect my kingdom and my family?" Marcus moved to comfort his father. "Catherine is an expert manipulator who spent years perfecting her deception. She fooled many people, including experienced diplomats and intelligence officers. Your love for her made you vulnerable, but it also showed your capacity for healing and hope after tragedy." The conversation continued for hours as Theodore processed the evidence and its implications. He asked detailed questions about specific incidents, trying to reconcile his memories with the new information about Catherine's true nature and activities. Some revelations were particularly painful, such as learning that romantic gestures and intimate moments had been calculated moves in a larger strategy of manipulation. But Theodore's most difficult realization concerned the broader implications for the kingdom. The military setbacks, diplomatic failures, and strategic disadvantages that had puzzled him for years suddenly made sense when viewed as the results of systematic intelligence leaks. Hundreds of his subjects had died because of information that Catherine had sold to enemies. "The Battle of Thornfield," Theodore said suddenly. "We lost over 300 men because the enemy knew our positions in advance. I never understood how our plans could have been compromised so completely." Elena nodded sadly. "That was one of many battles where Catherine's betrayals cost Valdorian lives. The enemy forces knew our troop movements, supply lines, and tactical plans because Catherine provided them with detailed intelligence. As the full scope of the betrayal became clear, Theodore's grief transformed into anger. The man who had loved Catherine deeply now faced the reality that their entire relationship had been built on lies, manipulation, and the blood of his own subjects. "What has been done with this information?" Theodore asked. "Have Catherine's crimes been exposed publicly?" Elena and Marcus explained their confrontation with Catherine and the arrangement they had negotiated for her quiet exile rather than public trial and execution. They outlined the reasoning behind their decision, emphasizing the need to protect the kingdom's stability, while ensuring that Catherine could never again threaten the royal family or national security. Theodore initially objected to the mercy his children had shown. "Catherine committed treason and murder. She should face public trial and execution according to the law." Elena replied, We considered that option carefully, but a public trial would reveal the full extent of the security breaches and could encourage other enemies to exploit the weaknesses that have been exposed. It would also devastate public confidence in the monarchy and potentially create political instability that could be more dangerous than Catherine herself. Marcus added, "We also considered your personal well-being. A public trial would subject you to intense scrutiny and embarrassment, forcing you to testify about intimate details of your relationship with Catherine. The private resolution protects both you and the kingdom from unnecessary trauma." Theodore spent several days considering the arrangement his children had negotiated. During this time, he met privately with Dr. Brand, Blackwood, Aunt Margaret, and other witnesses to hear their accounts firsthand. Each conversation confirmed the evidence and reinforced the devastating scope of Catherine's betrayal. The king's decision, when it finally came, reflected both his pain and his wisdom. Catherine will be exiled as you have arranged, but she will also be stripped of all royal titles and honors. Her name will be removed from official records, and her portrait will be taken down from the royal gallery. She will be remembered, if at all, as a cautionary tale about the dangers of trusting enemies who disguise themselves as allies. The practical implementation of Catherine's exile required careful coordination with foreign allies who agreed to provide secure custody while ensuring she could never again threaten Valdoria or any other kingdom. The official announcement to the palace and the public spoke vaguely of health problems that required the queen to retire from public life permanently. The transition period was difficult for everyone involved. Palace staff who had served Catherine loyally were confused and upset by her sudden disappearance. Foreign diplomats asked probing questions about the change in the royal family's composition. Citizens who had admired Catherine's charitable work and public service wondered about the circumstances of her abrupt retirement. Elena and Marcus worked closely with their father to manage these challenges, while beginning the process of rebuilding the kingdom's intelligence and security systems. The spy network that Catherine had operated required complete dismantling, with careful investigation of every member and connection to ensure that all threats were eliminated. The most satisfying aspect of the resolution was providing justice for Queen Isabella's memory. A private memorial service was held, attended by family members and close friends who had genuinely loved the murdered queen. Her true story was documented for history, ensuring that future generations would understand her courage in investigating the conspiracy and her sacrifice in trying to protect the kingdom. King Theodore gradually recovered his strength and confidence, though he remained changed by the experience of discovering how completely he had been deceived. He became more cautious in his personal relationships and more skeptical of those seeking access to royal circles. But he also developed a deeper appreciation for Elena and Marcus, recognizing their courage and wisdom in uncovering the truth and protecting both their family and their kingdom. Elena's role in the palace changed significantly following the resolution of the crisis. She was formally recognized as heir apparent and began taking on greater responsibilities in intelligence and security matters. Her experience in conducting complex investigations and managing sensitive information made her invaluable in rebuilding the systems that Catherine had corrupted. Marcus also assumed new responsibilities, particularly in military and diplomatic affairs, where his understanding of how Catherine's betrayals had affected operations proved crucial for implementing reforms and rebuilding relationships with allied kingdoms. The Kingdom of Valdoria emerged from the crisis stronger and more secure, having eliminated a major threat from within while learning valuable lessons about the importance of vigilance and verification in matters of national security. The royal family, though wounded by the experience, was ultimately united by their shared commitment to truth and justice. As Elena stood in her mother's former garden one evening, months after Catherine's exile, she reflected on the journey that had transformed her from a dutiful princess into a protector of the realm. The discovery of Queen Isabella's hidden documents had set in motion a chain of events that exposed decades of betrayal and saved the kingdom from continued compromise. The hardest lesson Elena had learned was that enemies could come from within, that those who seemed most trustworthy could be the most dangerous, and that protecting the kingdom sometimes required making painful personal sacrifices. But she had also learned that truth, courage, and determination could overcome even the most sophisticated deceptions. The crown of Valdoria would continue, stronger for having survived the shadow that had threatened to destroy it from within. And Elena,
now prepared to inherit that crown, would rule with the wisdom gained from understanding that vigilance and skepticism were as important as compassion and trust in protecting those she was sworn to serve.